Hey everybody, welcome to the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein and myself, Tommy Bateman. You can find us both at our websites. Michael is at 3minutetherapy.com and I am at therationalcounselor.com. Come on over and we'll be glad to chat with you. Today we kind of started last episode with finding your A in the second half of the last episode, and today we wanted to talk about the rest of the alphabet, right? Finding the B and C, and if we have time, we'll do D, E, and F. I suspect we will. So, Michael, why don't we start? Finding the B. How do we find that B?
Tommy, I think B is one of the most important elements here, but I would like to start with C because usually people are most aware of their C, which stands for undesirable emotional consequence. So often with my clients, I suggest starting with C if they don't know where to start. They're most aware that they're upset or that they're acting addictively. In fact, that's one of the first things they tell me when they come to me. I've been depressed or I have an alcohol problem or things like that. And that normally would be a C. So C is very simple. It's just a behavior or emotion that you're experiencing or have experienced that's undesirable in the sense that it doesn't help you and it tends to sabotage your goals. So that would be C.
So I got a question though. Has this ever happened to you? And I'm glad we started with the C. And why do people come to therapy is because they want to feel better and they understand what that undesirable feeling is or C is. But have you ever experienced somebody that went, I don't know what I'm feeling right now, but I wish it would stop?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have experienced that. Now, one thing that people can keep in mind is that it's not necessary to be exact, precise, or perfect at any of these points. So with C, if you're not sure what you're experiencing, you can just write something like, I was upset, or I was confused, or I was overwhelmed, even though you don't pinpoint it to anxiety or depression or anger or things like that. So you can write a general term there. Also, alternatively, it's not necessary that you write something at every single point. You could skip C and go back to A if you know what the situation is that's a problem. Or sometimes you may just know what you're telling yourself, what the irrational belief is, so you can just write that. So there's no need to be perfectionistic about this. What we're discussing is the ideal way to do it, but the most important thing is doing it and not doing it perfectly.
Okay.
Did you have any thoughts about finding the C?
No, usually people know how they feel. I've never experienced somebody going, I don't like how I'm feeling. We got to identify how we're feeling. I mean, and how I'm feeling right now, I actually have experienced that where I'd just say, well, we don't have to identify it. The fact that you don't like it is enough. Let's work on that and we'll go from there. So,
C could be unlikable emotion.
That's it. Yeah. Just why we don't have to get too precise with that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So we use that. We have the C. All right. So, and that's oftentimes what we do. The person comes in and they have this C they want to work on, and we go backwards sometimes. We've identified the A. Now we got the A and the C. What's the B? How do we find that B?
Okay. Now, often a lot of this is formulaic. Once you get A, you can sort of go through the whole thing working with A. So suppose A is I was criticized and C is I'm feeling depressed or hurt. So you take A and where's the must? Put in the must. I must not be criticized. So that's the B. B is a must. B is always some demand, some absolute, and those are usually in the forms of must, should, supposed to's, have to's, are awfulizing, awful, terrible, or horrible. It's awful, it's terrible, it's horrible, and what's sometimes called can't stand it-itis. I can't stand it, I can't tolerate it, I can't face it, I can't deal with that. So those are three prongs of the demands. Now, also there's global evaluation of oneself, others, or situations. So another irrational belief is I'm no good, you're no good, or life is no good. Now, one thing to keep in mind, which is very important, is that B stands for irrational belief, not unrealistic belief. So I could think the world is flat, that's unrealistic, but that's not going to get me upset unless I have an an irrational belief, such as it should not be flat. I can't stand the fact that the world's flat, or it's awful, terrible, or horrible that it's flat. So always look for those demands. And a demand is a fiction. Can't possibly exist. So musts and shoulds, there are no psychopathological musts and shoulds. We tend to make them up in our head. We invent them, which leads to disturbance. But if we could wipe out that word must, and the concept especially, from the human brain, then we'd all be 100% rational. So all these beliefs are fictions. If you say something like, my wife's been cheating on me, and she hasn't, that can't upset you because it's possible. It's possible your wife could be cheating on you. But it's not possible that she could turn into a rotten person because she's cheating on you. So that would be an irrational belief. My wife's been cheating on me, she's a rotten person. And the reason why it's not possible she's a rotten person, because rotten acts and rotten behaviors don't equal rotten people. We're all just imperfect humans who act imperfectly. Tommy, did you have anything to add to B?
Yeah, this I kind of take a very kind of simplistic response, and I think even Dr. Ellis, really wanted to do the same thing. And thank you for your illustration of and your examples of that, Michael. What Dr. Ellis did, I think he started with 12 irrational ideas, right? And then he started looking at them and realizing actually these kind of fit into 3. And that's where we came up with the concept of the 3 major musts. Irrational beliefs, psychopathological beliefs usually reside in 3 different beliefs. And Michael mentioned them. Irrational thinking about others, yourself, or situations. These demanding thinking about those 3 things. So once I know the A and the C, it's not hard to narrow it down in between one of those 3. Now we can get more precise. So you've been criticized. And we could talk about, I must not be criticized. I can't stand being criticized. That's kind of like the either the 3rd major must or the 1st major must. And it kind of depends on the whether or not the person goes, and I'm a lousy bum for it. Oh, now we got the 1st major must right there. And we could go from there and start addressing it and disputing it based on that. So really, guys, this is what I love about how simple it is to find the B, is if you know those 3 major musts, you can narrow it down pretty quickly. I mean, after you get practice, it happens just like that.
Yeah, very good. And thanks for mentioning the 3 major musts. That's very important.
And also rambling on there. I felt like I rambled. I'm sorry for rambling, guys.
Yeah.
I must not ramble.
Yeah, you're not a worm for rambling.
I feel like
although you were acting wormily.
I was.
But one of the things you mentioned that I wanted to highlight is that about anxiety and depression. There are 2 types of anxiety and depression. And as you said, Tommy, it could come from the 1st must or the 3rd must. The 1st must is called ego anxiety or ego depression because it's a demand on oneself. I must do well and get approval, and if I don't, I'm no good. So this could lead you to feel depressed or anxious. But it could be the 3rd must, as you said, a discomfort must or low frustration tolerance must, which says life must be fair, easy, and hassle-free. And if it's not, I can't stand it. Life is awful. And that could lead to depression about how hard your life has been, or anxious about difficulty you might face in the future. For example, if you feel anxious about going to the dentist, which many people do, that's normally not an ego must. You're normally not putting yourself down. I must do well at the dentist, but normally it's the 3rd must. I must not experience pain and discomfort at the dentist. It would be awful if I did. So that's a discomfort or low frustration tolerance must. So when you look for your must, as Tommy is saying, identify it through one of the 3 musts, and it could be the 1st or last if you're dealing with anxiety or depression.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I'm glad you separated the two. Now, we had an episode on, I think it was episode 13, don't quote me on that one, but in that range on, is a diagnosis useful? And notice how we had two separate causes, the first major must and the third major must, but we all call it anxiety. But the thing is, the solutions are slightly different, but we both call it anxiety in the DSM. What we need to diagnose is that B, that major must, to solve the problem. So I think that's a problem with our diagnostic language. I say the same thing with depression. So just be careful with that one, because sometimes if someone's saying they're anxious or depressed, it could have two different sources or more.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up the term diagnosis, because in REBT, the B is the diagnosis. Your irrational belief is that's your problem. Your problem isn't borderline personality disorder. That doesn't tell us very much.
Nope.
Thinking I must have your approval, or I must not have cravings, so I'll have a drink. That's the diagnosis, and that tells us exactly where to go. And that is D, E, and F, disputing the must and coming up with a new philosophy. Well, we've been running a little over 10 minutes. So what I would like to suggest we do, Tommy, if this makes sense, is do D, E, and F at the next episode.
I agree. I think getting that skill of disputing is very, very helpful. So I think that deserves an episode on its own, because we like to talk, don't we, Michael?
That's right, especially about REBT. So, so enjoy past and future REBT Advocates episodes, and please give us a like, and please subscribe to stay on the rational side of life.